America expected a quick victory. What it got was a war that nearly tore the country apart. May 8, 1846, Palo Alto, Texas. The dry grass is burning. Smoke rolls across the prairie in thick gray walls, and through that smoke, Mexican lancers charge forward with desperate courage. They're riding directly into American artillery. General Zachary Taylor watches from his horse, calm as if observing a drill. His 6-pounder cannons fire again. The sound is like thunder breaking across the plain. When the smoke clears, men and horses lie scattered across the grassland. The Mexican cavalry regroups, charges again. The American guns fire again. Same result. This isn't a battle, it's a demonstration. American technology versus Mexican courage. Math versus bravery. The outcome is never in doubt. By sunset, the Mexican army retreats. American soldiers walk the battlefield counting enemy dead. They're jubilant. This is exactly what they expected. Easy. Almost too easy. In Washington, politicians are already dividing up Mexican territory. California, New Mexico, maybe even all the way to Panama. President Polk has promised a swift, surgical war. Take what we want, establish American dominance, be home by Christmas. The American public believes it. How could they not? Mexico is politically unstable, economically weak, militarily inferior. This won't be a war, it'll be a demonstration, a quick lesson in American power. But here's what nobody in Washington understood in May 1846. Wars don't care about your expectations. Wars have their own logic. And this war, this conflict that was supposed to be a brief, glorious expansion of American destiny, would instead expose every fault line in American society. It would make heroes and destroy careers. It would add 1 million square miles to the United States while pushing the country towards civil war. The Mexican-American War was supposed to prove American strength. Instead, it revealed American arrogance, American brutality, and American division. It was the war that won an empire and broke a country. This is the story of how America learned that easy wars don't exist. To understand why America thought this would be easy, you have to understand the moment. It's 1845. The United States has just annexed Texas, despite Mexican protests that Texas is still Mexican territory. Mexico has never recognized Texan independence after their revolution in 1836. From Mexico's perspective, the United States has just stolen a province. President James K. Polk doesn't see it that way. Polk is a Tennessee Democrat, a protege of Andrew Jackson, a believer in manifest destiny, the idea that American expansion across the continent is not just inevitable, but divinely ordained. He was elected on this platform: expand or die. Take Oregon from Britain, take California from Mexico, make America a continental power. But there's a problem. Mexico won't sell California, won't negotiate, won't even receive American diplomats. The Mexican government, weak and unstable as it is, cannot survive politically if it's seen as giving in to American pressure. Polk needs a war, but he needs Mexico to start it, so he does something clever and cynical. He orders General Zachary Taylor to move U.S. troops into the disputed territory between the Nueces River and the Rio Grande. The Texans claim the Rio Grande as their border. Mexico says the border is the Nueces, over 100 miles north. The land in between is contested. Taylor moves into it with 4,000 soldiers and waits. On April 25, 1846, Mexican cavalry crosses the Rio Grande and ambushes an American patrol. 11 Americans dead, the rest captured. Polk has his war. He goes to Congress on May 11th with a message that rewrites recent history. Mexico has passed the boundary of the United States, has invaded our territory, and shed American blood on American soil. It's a lie, or at best, a highly selective interpretation of whose soil this is, but it works. Congress declares war. The vote isn't even close: 174 to 14 in the House, 40 to 2 in the Senate. The dissenters are dismissed as unpatriotic. A young Whig congressman from Illinois named Abraham Lincoln will later introduce the spot resolutions, demanding that Polk identify the exact spot where American blood was shed on American soil. He's ignored. The war has momentum now. Volunteers flood recruitment stations. 50,000 men answer the call in the first months. They expect glory, adventure, easy victories against an inferior enemy. Many think they'll be home in 6 months. The newspapers feed the enthusiasm. Mexico is described as weak, divided, incompetent. American technology, particularly artillery, is superior. American soldiers are better trained. American democracy makes for better fighters than Mexican authoritarianism. It's all very reassuring. And for a while, it looks true. Zachary Taylor wins at Palo Alto, then at Resaca de la Palma. Then he invades Mexico, takes Monterrey after heavy fighting. Each victory is celebrated in American newspapers as proof of American superiority. Taylor becomes a national hero, old, rough and ready, presidential material. General Stephen Kearny marches west, takes New Mexico without firing a shot, then continues to California, where American settlers have already declared independence, the Bear Flag Republic. California is falling into American hands like ripe fruit. Winfield Scott, the commanding general of the U.S. Army, plans an amphibious invasion at Veracruz, then a march inland to Mexico City. Like Cortez, he'll take the capital and dictate terms. Scott is supremely confident. He's the best military mind in America. He has superior artillery, better logistics, disciplined troops. It all looks easy. American forces are winning every battle. Mexican armies are larger but poorly equipped, poorly led. The Mexican government is in chaos, unable to mount a coherent defense. In Washington, politicians are already arguing not about whether to take Mexican territory, but how much to take. All of Mexico? Just the northern provinces? Where to draw the line? This is the American mindset in the fall of 1846. Confidence bordering on arrogance, victory assumed. The war is going exactly as planned. But wars don't follow plans, and the easy victories were about to get complicated. September 17, 1847, Chapultepec Castle, outside Mexico City. American forces are preparing to assault the fortress that guards the western approaches to the capital. Inside the castle are Mexican cadets, teenagers, some as young as 13, military students. The Niños Héroes, they'll be called later, the boy heroes. The Americans bombard the castle with artillery, then they assault. The fighting is brutal, room to room, hand to hand. The Mexican cadets fight to the death. Some wrap themselves in Mexican flags and jump from the walls rather than surrender. This is not what Americans expected. They expected quick surrender, rational calculation of military odds. Instead, they found resistance that bordered on suicidal. Mexicans who'd rather die than accept American occupation. And Chapultepec was not an isolated incident. It was the pattern of the entire war. Go back to Monterrey, September 1846. Taylor's forces are fighting street by street through a Mexican city. Mexican soldiers and civilians fire from rooftops, from windows, from doorways. Every house is a fortress. Every street is a killing ground. American soldiers die in anonymous alleys, shot by enemies they never see. This is guerrilla warfare before Americans had a term for it. This is what happens when a regular army faces a population that refuses to accept conquest. Taylor makes Monterrey, but the cost is higher than expected. Hundreds of American casualties. And then Taylor makes a decision that enrages Washington. He grants the Mexican garrison honorable terms. They can march out with their weapons. They get an 8 weeks armistice. Polk is furious. You don't give your enemy breathing room when you're trying to break their will. But Taylor did it because he understood something Polk didn't. Military victories weren't translating into political surrender. You could win every battle and still not end the war. And there's another problem emerging, one that nobody in Washington wants to acknowledge. American soldiers are committing atrocities. Not all of them, not even most of them, but enough. Enough that Mexican civilians fear American occupation. Enough that resistance stiffens rather than collapse. Lieutenant Gordon Meade, future Union commander at Gettysburg, writes home about the volunteers. They have killed 5 or 6 innocent people walking in the street for no other object than their own amusement. They rob and steal the cattle and corn of the poor farmers, and in fact, act more like a body of hostile Indians than civilized whites. These are American officers writing during and after the war, acknowledging what many Americans refuse to admit. This war is ugly. The righteousness of manifest destiny does not survive contact with the reality of occupation. But there's even a deeper problem, one that goes beyond military conduct. The war is exposing the fundamental division in American politics, the question that will eventually tear the country apart. Slavery.
The North and South both support the war initially. Both want territorial expansion, but they want it for different reasons.
The South wants new territory where slavery can expand. The North wants territory for free labor, for small farmers, for a vision of America that doesn't include slavery. In August 1846, David Wilmot, a Democratic congressman from Pennsylvania, introduces a proviso to a war appropriations bill. The Wilmot Proviso says that slavery will be prohibited in any territory acquired from Mexico. The proviso passes the House, dies in the Senate, but it's introduced again and again. It becomes the defining political fight of the war, not whether to fight Mexico, but what to do with Mexican territory once you've taken it. Southern congressmen are explicit. They will not support a war that expands the Union without expanding slavery. Northern congressmen are equally explicit. They will not support expansion that creates new slave states. Polk wanted a quick war that would unite the country behind territorial expansion. Instead, he's getting a grinding conflict that's dividing the country along sectional lines. Every new acre of Mexican territory is a potential battleground in the American political war over slavery. And the military situation isn't resolving itself. Winfield Scott lands at Veracruz in March 1847, takes the city after a bombardment that kills hundreds of civilians, then begins his march inland. He wins at Cerro Gordo, at Contreras, at Churubusco. Each battle is an American victory. Each battle costs more than expected. Each mile deeper into Mexico requires more troops to hold supply lines against guerrillas. Scott reaches the outskirts of Mexico City by September. He's won every battle. His army is exhausted. Desertion is becoming a problem. Disease is killing more men than combat, and the Mexican government still won't surrender. This is the central paradox of the war. America is winning militarily, completely. American forces have defeated every Mexican army sent against them, but Mexico won't accept defeat, won't negotiate. The political objective, forcing Mexico to cede territory, remains out of reach despite total military dominance. Antonio López de Santa Anna, the Mexican general and president who lost Texas, who was defeated at San Jacinto, is back in power. He's leading Mexican forces against Scott. He loses every engagement, but he keeps fighting because surrender means political death. Surrender means accepting that Mexico has lost California, New Mexico, and potentially more. The war that was supposed to be easy has become a quagmire. American forces are occupying Mexican cities, but occupation requires troops that could be used to advance. Supply lines stretch hundreds of miles through hostile territory. Guerrillas attack convoys. American soldiers die in ones and twos, murdered in occupied towns by civilians who look peaceful until they pull hidden weapons. This is the war nobody expected. Not glorious conquest, but ugly occupation. Not quick victory, but grinding attrition. Not unity at home, but division that threatens the country's political foundations. And still, Scott pushes toward Mexico City because there's no other option. No way out but through. The war has its own momentum now. It will end when Mexico City falls. It has to. The political situation in America can't sustain a longer war. So Scott assaults Chapultepec, sends his soldiers into brutal, close-quarters combat against Mexican cadets who refuse to surrender, takes the castle at the cost of hundreds of casualties, then pushes into Mexico City itself. September 14, 1847, American forces occupy Mexico City. The Mexican government flees. Santa Anna is removed from power. The war, militarily, is over, but politically it's just beginning. Nicholas Trist is not a soldier. He's a diplomat, chief clerk of the State Department, sent by Polk to negotiate peace terms once Scott took Mexico City. His instructions are clear. Take California, take New Mexico, maybe take more if you can. Pay minimal compensation. But Trist is in Mexico City watching American soldiers police a hostile city, watching the Mexican government refuse to form, because any government that negotiates with the invaders will be seen as treason.
And he's reading reports from Washington where the political situation is deteriorating rapidly. The Whigs have won the 1846 midterm elections. They control the House now. They're questioning the war, questioning Polk, preparing to make it a campaign issue in 1948. The Wilmot Proviso keeps being introduced. The debates over slavery and new territories are getting heated, more threatening. And here's the crucial thing Trist realizes. The longer this war continues, the worse it gets for America. Not militarily. Militarily, America has won. But politically, socially, the war is poison. So Trist does something extraordinary. He negotiates a treaty that gives America less than Polk wants. California and New Mexico, yes, but not Baja California, not more of northern Mexico. And he agrees to pay $15 million in compensation, plus assume $3.25 million in claims by American citizens against Mexico. Polk is furious. He'd recalled Trist months earlier when Trist argued for more moderate terms, but Trist ignored the recall, negotiated anyway, sent the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo to Washington as a fait accompli. Polk is trapped. He doesn't want this treaty. He wants more territory. But the political situation won't support continuing the war. The Whigs will destroy him. The sectional crisis over slavery is getting dangerous. He has to end the war now. So he submits the treaty to the Senate. It's ratified on March 10, 1848. The war is officially over. The United States has gained 525,000 square miles. California, Nevada, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, parts of Colorado, Wyoming, Kansas, Oklahoma, for $18.25 million plus war costs, one of the largest territorial acquisitions in American history. From a purely materialistic perspective, it's an extraordinary success. The United States is now a continental power, stretching from Atlantic to Pacific. But the costs are staggering in ways that don't show up on maps. 13,283 American soldiers died, most from disease, not combat, dysentery, yellow fever, typhoid, the realities of 19th century military medicine. Thousands more were permanently disabled by wounds or disease. Mexican casualties are harder to calculate. Military deaths were probably between 5,000 and 10,000, but civilian deaths from the war, from American bombardments, from occupation, from economic disruption and disease, estimates range from 25,000 to 50,000 or more. Mexico lost 55% of its territory and tens of thousands of lives. But there's a deeper cost, one that wouldn't be paid fully for another 13 years. The Wilmot Proviso never passed, but the debate it started never ended. Every piece of territory taken from Mexico became a battleground in the slavery debate. California applied for statehood as a free state in 1849. Southern senators threatened secession. The Compromise of 1950 barely held the Union together. Kansas and Nebraska were organized with popular sovereignty over slavery, leading to Bleeding Kansas and a preview of civil war. The political coalition that won the Mexican War shattered. The Whig Party collapsed. The Democratic Party split along sectional lines. And in 1861, 13 years after the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, the Union broke apart. The Civil War finished what the Mexican War started, and the lessons learned in Mexican cities about the limits of military power, about the costs of occupation, about the gap between tactical victory and strategic success, those lessons would have to be relearned in the Philippines, in Vietnam, in Iraq, in Afghanistan. Wars are easy to start. They're easy to win if you have overwhelming force, but they're never easy to end well. The Mexican-American War proved that, and 2 centuries later, we're still learning the same lesson. Thank you for watching. If this changed how you think about American expansion or the path to the Civil War, let me know in the comments. Hit that like button if you appreciate documentaries that examine the complexity behind simple narratives, and subscribe for more deep dives into the wars that shaped our world in ways we're still grappling with today. Until next time, remember, history is never as simple as we'd like it to be.